Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to hold off a few more minutes to make sure everybody who was registered to come is able to make it, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much.
Watch football all season long, live and cable free.
We're just going to wait a couple more minutes to make sure everybody is able to make it who did register, or we might have a few folks tuning in late. We know this is about dinner time, so we appreciate everybody tuning in. Feel free to grab some grub while you partake in this info session. And again, we'll start in just a couple moments here. Thank you for your patience and thanks for joining us. All right. Hello, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. Appreciate your feedback as we waited it out for some folks here. My name is Danica Rines. I am the Senior Manager of Communications and Media Relations here at CA. First housekeeping note, I just want to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded just to make sure that we not only have it on record, but we can also share it with folks who were not able to make it tonight. So we appreciate you though being here. And I just want to say, as we try to emphasize to everybody when they participate in an event like this, just by showing up tonight, you are doing the work in your community. And just by showing up tonight, you are engaging in this very important process for us. This is a true demonstration of our values here at CA. We truly believe that every year. And that means that your input is important and that your feedback does matter. And so thank you so much for spending your very valuable time here with us to understand the process a little bit better, share your questions, and hopefully get some of them answered here tonight. So quick housekeeping before we get started here. We are going to use the Q&A function tonight. You might notice that the chat does not work, and that is very intentional because it's hard to monitor a couple of places when there are a lot of people chiming in with questions. So the Q&A function really gives us more ability to track what's been answered and what hasn't been. So we're going to go ahead and use that tonight. If you've never used it before, just go down to the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A with 2 speech bubbles. Click on that. You can just submit anonymously or with your name attached, either way. And what my job primarily here is tonight is to monitor those questions. And if there are common themes, we might tie some together for the sake of time. If, you know, I will add this too. This is a budget discussion. So we ask that questions stay on topic and on theme here tonight. I am more than happy to have you email me directly or the communications@columbiaassociation.org. That's the email address for the communications team. We'd be more than happy to pass along your questions that are not about the budget to the appropriate person if you have some other questions here. So again, try to keep things on theme tonight. That would be awesome. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and throw them in the Q&A. I'd be happy to answer them as well. So I think that covers the long and short of what we need to housekeeping wise. So we have here with us tonight, I just want to introduce everybody before we get started. We have our President and CEO, Lakey Boyd, our CFO and Senior Vice President, Susan Krabby, our Vice President of Community Programs and Services, Dan Burns. Dennis Matty will be joining us. He is our Vice President of Community Operations. And then our Director of Finance, Lynn Schwartz, is also here. Lakey and Susan will be covering most of the slide presentation. The others are here to support with answering questions if need be. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lakey.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I want to make a few opening comments. I'll echo what Danica already said, that we really appreciate everyone that can attend tonight. And we do record this because we recognize that setting a certain date at a certain time means that some people can make it and some people can't. So recording it is also a tool that we're trying to make sure everybody has access to. Robust information around the budget process, which I'll kind of outline in a moment. I do want to start by saying, can we go to the next slide? I'm sorry. I'm used to pressing it. I do want to start by kind of outlining how we're going to move through the presentation. So I am going to give an overview of CA because in my experience, I'll be at 1.5 years this week. People still have a variety of views of what CA is doing and who we are and what we do. So I want to kind of do that at the top and then frame out the conversation about our budget process in particular. Susan is then going to take over and really drill into some detail. I do want to make it clear that all of this is posted on our website, and there is a lot of detail. There is certainly not enough time if we were to set aside several hours to go through it page by page. So the goal here tonight is to hit the high points and then really concentrate in the Q&A section where we're going to take questions from you. And then that is when Dan and Dennis, two of our vice presidents, are going to join to be able to share more details. And then I'll end by touching on kind of next steps from here. One of the key elements I'm going to stress is that the title of this is pre-budget, and that is for a reason. So we are not at a draft budget stage. We are not at a full draft. That will come later, and again, I'll outline the process, but I do want to be clear about that kind of as we kick off. So next slide. CA today, we are a very different organization than we were 55 years ago when we were created, a very different organization than we were just a few years ago pre-pandemic. And I think it is always good to remind everyone, and I'm always surprised when I do this, how many people, even lifelong Columbians or people that have been here for decades, CA has evolved just like the community has. So next slide. This is really a demonstration of the wide variety of services and ultimately who we serve. So in terms of properties, almost 26,000 residential properties in Columbia, over 1,100 commercial properties, approximately 105,000 people across Columbia as a census designated place, since we are not a city. And that includes just shy of 6,000 businesses and just over 96,000 employees that are working in Columbia every day. So then when you really think about CA as an organization, we have 16,000 memberships. So we are getting pretty close to what had been pre-pandemic levels. And we also have 5,500 cardholders, Columbia cardholders, which means not a member, but a resident. But I always find it interesting to pull out this visits number at 1.85 million last fiscal year. So that is a combination of our fitness clubs, but it's also sports and recreation. So the 23 outdoor pools and the tennis center and the ice rink. We have school-age services and the teen center for youth and teen, and then our art center as well as our multicultural programming. So we serve this community in a wide variety of ways, whether you live here, whether you work here, whether you visit here. Next slide. So I'll kind of give some imagery because I think that, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words to really remind people of all the components. You're going to hear about the two big departments, community operations and community programs and services. And we have those vice presidents with us tonight. Those are the ones that you mostly think about when you think of CA. So community operations includes parks, pathways, and play areas. This realignment occurred last fiscal year and was something that I did when I came into the leadership role to really try and realign our teams to everything from phrasing to line items that are easier for people in the community to understand what we do. I think everybody knows what we're talking about when we say parks, pathways, and play areas. There's also a team that really focuses on open space, facilities, and building grounds. And then, of course, we have facility services, which is separate. Next slide. In this same team, community operations, there is a significant component that is dedicated to event services. And this is a lot of the, what I call often invisible work. So a lot of our logistics, a lot of our setup and takedown, a lot of picking up trash and making sure that areas, and that's both at our properties at the lakefront. You know, many people are familiar with our programming there, but we do that across all 10 villages as well in terms of support. Then there is our sustainability team, and that really runs a gamut from everything from renewable energy into watershed work and into working with a lot of volunteers in the community. For instance, Weed Warriors is an example of that. And then there's a group that I think had a pretty significant realignment when I did that last fiscal year. community development and real estate services. So this used to be kind of living in multiple teams across the organization, was combined into one. And that is the combination of, we are a major property owner ourselves as an organization, but we also deal with a lot of organizations and companies that need easements on our property, or we might be interacting around a planning or zoning issue, or we might be doing something with our ability to give people survey support as residents. So it's really kind of a wide variety, and we have a much better focus on it now with the realignment. Next slide. So shifting into community programs and services. This is another one that you might know us in every way, or you might know us in one way. So I think wellness and fitness, many people are familiar with our fitness clubs across the community. Sports and recreation, you can kind of see from the photos, the variety we're talking about, whether it's outdoor pools or golf or tennis or the ice rink or the sports park. Next slide. And then we have our youth and teen services. So some of that is explicitly in our facilities, and some of that is out on our grounds. And then some of that is done through partnerships, which you can see here. This does include our school age services, which many people in Columbia are familiar with. And then we have arts and culture, which we have a facility in the Arts Center that has a variety of types of classes, and a lot of investment has been made around the type of equipment that is in the Arts Center. And then we have our international exchange and multicultural programming, which again happens here in Columbia and in years past has been in other places as well. And then we have the archives, which is associated with CA and really is a unique element of what we do, and started at the origin of our community 55 years ago. So we keep all of that history, but we also have a lot of documents, and it's a big resource, frankly, often external to the community as well. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we do. But I think, you know, words matter as well. So this is the closest that we can get to getting everything we do on a single slide. And that's still a pretty big hill to climb. But I think of our work and the senior team, and the way we talk about it internally is first, absolutely as a steward, and then second, as a service provider. So we are a property owner, 3,600 acres, 95 miles of pathways. And then you really start getting into over 170 tot lots and how many bridges we have, the 3 lakes, but we have over 40 ponds. We have outdoor basketball courts and tennis courts. And that 0.5 is a real one, it's a half court. And then we do deal in the 10 village center plazas. We are responsible for that maintenance, and we do facility services at those buildings. CA owns them, the village manages them. So again, whether it be the Arts Center, whether it be the Teen Center, our outdoor kind of lakefront at the 3 different lakes, we have pavilions, the dog park and the horse center, which depending on your interest can also be less visited or the most visited. Symphony Woods, which is 50 acres right in the center of downtown Columbia. And then of course, our facilities around fitness and wellness and sports and recreation on the right-hand side. So our clubs, our tennis facilities, our myriad swimming pools. And I think what really matters when we do this is really getting an idea of both the scale and the complexity of operations that we run on a daily basis. So next slide. So let's talk a bit more about the budget process, where we are, and kind of as we're getting underway. As I said, we're in a pre-budget materials phase. So what that means is we've started to put estimates together that Susan is going to drill into. The board of directors saw those for the first time last week, and we're kind of kicking off the phase of what's next and how we get into more detail. We want community feedback, both to us as CA. Of course, if you prefer to speak directly to your CA board member, that is certainly an option, as well as coming to meetings and speaking at that point. So next slide. our starting point, I would probably put at the top of the list that CA is different today in some obvious ways, but it's often important to kind of remind everyone. So first, we have fewer employees than we did pre-pandemic. Second, we have less revenue than we did pre-pandemic. Third, we do have the same assets, yet they're aging every year. Kind of stating the obvious, but it's important to remember that many of our facilities were built in the same era. So the kind of maintenance, repair and maintenance we're doing, and then the necessity, of renovation work. And then lastly, we're dealing with changing behavior, whether that's residents or members or people that work in the community that are still being affected by COVID. So I also like to think of, in a crisis such as COVID, what are the silver linings, right? What are the positives? And I'm very proud to say I think CA pulled many out. So while we are leaner, in many ways, we are more efficient, we are more effective, we are more nimble than we were pre-pandemic. So one of the key elements that I certainly can see, even looking back at previous budget documents, is a muscle that was formed during the pandemic, which is managing expenses much more closely to revenue. That is something that was an absolute necessity during the pandemic, but it's something that we still do very well today across our team members. We also have a significant emphasis on process improvement. So again, some of that was out of necessity with the pandemic because CA absolutely loved its paper and did a lot of mail outs and a lot of, you've got to come in and sign this form. And we've been able to convert much of that, everything from billing to our customer care to be more streamlined in electronic processes. But what that means is a combination of increased efficiency, but also reduced costs. And then lastly, I believe that we have a real renewed commitment to community engagement. And that is not, just putting on an event. Engagement is bi-directional. So we have improved our ability to get a closer feedback cycle with the community to make sure that our programs and services are aligned with what the community wants today and aren't just legacy from yesterday. And we're trying to stay aware of what are the kinds of needs that aren't being served that maybe we should be thinking about for the future. The other half of this slide, is the global economy. So we do not exist in a vacuum by any stretch. So we are impacted by all of those trends that you're seeing happening every time you pick up a newspaper or read something online. So we too are affected by inflation at the highest point, interest rates going up, and an expectation that they will continue to. There's some early indicators. Many economists believe a recession. If not, just wait because it's expected next year. Supply chain continues absolutely to be a significant challenge for us in an unpredictable and wide variety of ways. And then lastly, staffing and recruiting, particularly for directly customer-facing positions. So we are affected by all of those and are dealing with those challenges on a daily basis here at CA. So next slide. This is our budget process. So this is something that is on our website, on our budget page, and it kind of gives you an idea of how we're going to kind of work through the process. So tonight, November 1st, we are having this special information system session. Most of our meetings, most of our opportunities for input are one of two ways. Either attending a board of director work session or meeting, or completing an online survey. So I would recommend that that be one of the key ways that you continue to check in and think about engaging outside of this process. Next slide. So I think that the last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Susan is an acknowledgement from a high level perspective that Our assumptions are baked in and we acknowledge them in this process. So to do the scale of estimates that we have to do at this stage, and in order to have all of the interconnected parts and pieces of CA do that, we have to make a lot of assumptions. We note them, which is why the budget document and the pre-budget materials are so significantly large. We try to note them in all of the places. If you have questions about those, ask tonight. But there's also complexity when we work to pull apart, particularly in this phase, changeable and fixed expenses, which Susan will talk about. We have to make assumptions there. So we just want to openly acknowledge that. Combined with that is something that even in the time that I've been here, I have been asked, and I think is always important to just address head on. There is often a question of what are truly fixed costs? What are the ones that we have to do in order to exist if everything else stopped, if every program and service stopped? And it is such a multifaceted answer to figure out what is our minimum service level. And so what I want to kind of, point out is just a few of those highlights. If we were to say, close a facility, not only is that not a single year exercise that only hits the operating budget, but it's also an exercise where there might be initially a cost outlay in order to eventually wind down the operation. There's a real estate impact from that kind of decision. There's that question of, oh, well, couldn't you just sell a facility? A lot of our buildings, not just our open space, but our buildings actually sit on property that is credited open space, which means that it's not zoned commercial or it's not zoned residential, and thus does not have the same kind of market value as, putting a house on the market or a commercial office building on the market. Additionally, there is still a bare minimum of administrative costs that would need to be met. And the reality of lots of contractual obligations that we have, whether it be with lenders or insurers. And then the annual charge is, actually written in deeds. So from that perspective, there is still an administration that has to happen just around that singular process. So I think it's just, in summary, the idea is that there are a lot of assumptions. We try and acknowledge as many as we can where we're making them, but we'll certainly take questions. But I also always want to caution that it's not quite as clean as a binary yes, no, plus or minus. CA as an organization, as I said a few minutes ago, the scale and complexity is deep and wide, which makes it a fascinating organization to work for. But it's also one that in the budget process, I think that's really important to understand and recognize. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Krabby, our Senior Vice President and CFO, to go through more of the details that we have today.
Well, great. Thank you, Lakey. Great introduction, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm not gonna read you pages of numbers, not even gonna show pages of numbers, but they're hope to orient you to the proposed or these sort of very preliminary numbers and dollars that we have both in the operating budget and the capital. So we'll talk first about the major assumptions. And we can go to the next slide, please, Danica. So in September, just a month ago, the CA board held two discussions about focused on the board's strategic priorities and their desired outcomes for FY24. So they reviewed the community input that had been received to date. We ran a pre-budget process prioritization exercise. Over 300 people participated in that, and also just using the CA strategic plan that was approved for fiscal years through FY24. And out of those two discussions and reviewing that material, the board came up with basically an overarching charge and then an alternate evaluation they wanted us to look at. So overall, the acknowledgement was that what CA is doing is good, that they want to keep our existing programs and services, and focus on environmental sustainability, climate vulnerability, and leadership development, and also accessibility as part of those elements as well. And then there was interest in looking at potentially impacting our capital reinvestment. So we took that back to our offices here and made some assumptions, a lot of estimates, crunched some numbers. And the key points that I'd like to make is that we will continue to move forward. This FY24 pre-budget material demonstrates that. We do assume constrained resources. As Lakey pointed out, we don't have the non-annual charge or the user membership and fee revenue that we had previously. But we still are focusing on process improvements to make the experience interacting with CA better and to save costs and gain efficiency wherever we can. The open space and its wonderful amenities, the parks and pathways and tot lots are robustly operated and maintained in this pre-proposal or material. All 23 outdoor pools are open. We anticipate and project programs and services provided at pre-pandemic levels. And, but we are focusing increasingly on employee matters, retention, recruiting, and training. So just as many people are experiencing, and as like you pointed out, we are challenged with recruiting, especially with customer-facing functions, and a lot of our team members are interacting with the customers every day, all day long. So also increasing community engagement and events, and a focus on improved communication, more digital, and cybersecurity. So we did want to point out that this is the assumption at this point for the annual charge, is that the rate would be 68 cents and the cap 3.5%, as it has been for multiple years and as it is currently. So this has not been voted on by the CA board. We've stepped back from having the board commit to that at the beginning so that there could be more deliberation, more ongoing engagement with the community, and an ability to be more flexible about this as the process goes on. So this will be determined by the board later in the process. So big multicolored pie here just shows you the revenue sources CA-wide for where we are right now. As of, this is our estimate for the current fiscal year based on just one quarter. So second quarter ended yesterday. We'll be revising this, but as of the first quarter, this is where we are. So you can see that the single biggest piece of the pie is 40% of our total revenue, from all sources, is the annual residential annual charge. But right behind that, really not far off, is the commercial annual charge. That's 22%. And so that's about a third of our total annual charge. And it's, even though it's 1,100 properties, it's which is far less than a third of the total properties, it's a third of the revenue. Then memberships are projected to bring in 20% of our revenue, and all other sources, tuition, program fees, court time, tea times, all of those related fees are in that 18% in the light blue. Okay, next slide. So another graphical picture. This is a little bit different presentation. So this is on almost a cash basis. This is kind of a sources and uses format to show what's coming into CA, the sources on the left, and how that cash is being used on the right. So I wanted to point out that this proposal, the proposed pre-budget materials, incorporates, in addition to the emergency cash reserves of $3 million. And if you followed us lately, you know that that was something that was just instituted 2 years ago. And we have a funding plan for that. And that $3 million would help us meet that funding plan for FY24, that target. This is clear that we would have an excess of income over spending by, or I'm sorry, excess of spending over income by $2.8 million. And that So we would, and this is on a cash basis. So when we look at the bottom line, we'll see that a little bit differently. So next slide. So as Lakey pointed out, we last year, and actually during the pandemic, there was interest in seeing what is it that CA is committed to spend? What would we have to spend at a bare minimum to maintain our assets and keep the organization going versus what's variable or changeable. So changeable expenses are the ones that are incurred to provide programs and services that would vary depending on the size of the program. They're not required by any kind of commitment. Like you pointed out that we do have leases, we have contracts, we have other obligations that are required. They are in the fixed and administrative expenses. We would still be billing and collecting the annual charge on the right. We'd still be maintaining CA's natural open space, parks, playgrounds, play activities. We assumed that we would do that at FY23 levels. We would still have to provide organizational leadership. There'd still be audits. There would be administrative processes. We would still have people to pay and bills to pay, dollars to collect, and all of those records to maintain, and the communications related to those activities. We found during the shutdown in the early days of the pandemic that we still had to minimally maintain community programs and services buildings. Even if they're closed, they have to be heated or conditioned to some degree to prevent, the pipes freezing. There's just some minimal maintenance that would have to occur. We also assumed that as a fixed cost, the village buildings would be maintained fully at FY23 levels, and the villages would be supported. And then finally, we would have insurance requirements. There'd be property taxes and interest and depreciation CA-wide. So these are a lot of assumptions. Any two experts may not agree with those, but this is what we established, and we're using the same criteria that we used last year. So next slide. It's just a summary of, so what does that look like for CA? So fixed income, annual charge income, there's some leases and some rental income that would come in that would be something we couldn't get out of readily. And there's other income interest on the cash that's on the books right now. And then the fixed and administrative expenses, that includes community operations, half of administration, the village funding, as I noted, and audit services, insurance and taxes for all our buildings, depreciation and interest expense. And the interest expense is on our fixed term debt, so we would have to be paying that as well. Shows at the bottom line there that the fixed income does not quite cover all of these fixed commitments. So that's the 1,776,000 in the negative there that is not quite met by the fixed income sources. Okay, next one. So this slide looks like we're showing a negative 3.2 million. That's a dash, so it's actually a positive 3.2 million increase in net assets, but it is down from what we projected for the first quarter in the first quarter of FY23. So why is it down? That estimate was done in August. We anticipate updating that in Q2, as I mentioned, and that'll come out and be published to the community in December. Also, we've increased some spending on community operations, on events, and it also reflects things that just another increase in the minimum wage, for example, that's coming in January. It reflects increased investment in cyber and some applications CA-wide that have reached their end of their useful lives. It also reflects some increased legal fees, anticipated insurance increases, and more depreciation as we put more assets in service. All right. So bottom line, 3.154 at this point. I did want to point out that for community programs and services, in total, that department covers all of its changeable expenses. So that was the goal, one of the goals that was set by the board for last year, and we were able to project being able to achieve that this year as well. Community operations is just a significant user of annual charge income, and it's just under $22 million in this projection. And then we're proposing about an $11 million allocation for capital, and we'll talk about that a little more soon. So again, they're very preliminary numbers, much more to come, as we refine and narrow the process going forward. Okay, next one. So community operations, Lakey just wisely realigned this department last year, and the categories I think make so much more sense and are more relatable to the community. So you see, as you dig into the materials, if you choose to, that are posted on the website, you'll see the projections for each of these buckets, if you will. Next slide. Key assumptions for this department: full cohort of pre-COVID positions, plus some administrative help for the community development and real estate services. So full cohort of positions, unfortunately, still means that there are vacant positions to be filled and will probably occur on an ongoing basis. There's, I think I noted seven positions open on our website right now, so actively recruiting to fill at least 7 jobs in that area. The increased funding for trash pickup and aquatic vegetation, harvesting and maintenance at the lakes. So one thing we learned in the pandemic is that the lakes are really popular, and they got a lot more use. We saw a lot more use there, and with more use comes more trash and increased maintenance, and the community's desire for those lakes to look even better than they do. So that's reflected in these projections. Increased funding for tot lot maintenance. So we just picking up and accelerating that program, especially related to play surface replacement. The CA board wanted us to make sure that we emphasized environmental sustainability, that we looked at our climate vulnerability. We had a study done last year. And so there are resources for expanded tree planting and reforestation, and also for invasive plant removal projects, which are become more and more of an area of interest for the Columbia community. And then we were to update and replace some of the signage and benches at locations that get a lot of use. So in this case, this is a decrease in net assets of 22 million. We talked about that just a slide or two ago. It is below the current estimate by 15%. And again, that's honestly, that's increased cost. And as Lakey pointed out, there's inflation impact in this department and investments in operating budget activities and events, support, and staffing costs. So the one thing that we didn't talk about that I think we'll see more in this department and in the capital budget is the impact of the supply chain issues. Another thing to note is that we all are well aware of the big storms that occurred in the South, and I think we will see building materials go in that direction, and it'll be harder to get some of those materials. Okay, next one. So community programs and services, these are the things, those beautiful pictures that indicate how we most engage with folks in improving their health and wellness, providing opportunities to recreate and to develop sports skills, and also to be engaged in the arts and international cultures and programs, and to serve the youth and teen of Columbia. So next slide. So key assumptions here, we already mentioned that all 23 pools will be open with a full season of CNSL activity. So all of this assumes staffing. It was very, very challenging last year, as many people know. And so we will get some lessons learned from that, jump on that even earlier, most likely, and work very hard to get those pools staffed and ready to be open for the full season. We're only assuming a modest increase in membership rates and about 3% growth in total members for the year. It's important to remember that this reflects the long-awaited renovations of Columbia Arts Center. So those will impact the Art Center schedule, and it will be closed for about 2 months for those renovations. We do anticipate and show in these projections that school-age services will be open at all sites, AM and PM, and that there'll be 30 children at each one. Again, that is subject to staffing. Everyone's looking for teachers, and Columbia Association's no exception there. Youth and teen, this is an accessibility point. These projection, the proposals include the addition of a part-time person to expand the accessibility and expand programming, and to just to make sure that there's even more activities for teens at the Teen Center. So next slide. This is the community programs and services, big picture bottom line is a decrease in net assets also, and that's typical. So the department income exceeds its changeable expenses, but not the fixed expenses. So there are a lot of programs, there are services, there's the facilities that need to be maintained that just cannot be covered by the dollars that they bring in. So why is it down compared to the estimate? Again, increased costs in FY24, minimum wage, inflation, and increased spending on programs like the Teen Center that I just mentioned. Also in FY23, we had some very nice grants for school age services, and we don't anticipate that. Well, that program has ended, and we don't anticipate being able to replace those. All right, so next slide, capital. So what does that mean, first of all? Capital items are ones that have a useful life. We expect to be able to use them for at least 2 years, and they meet certain thresholds and cost. So that threshold generally is $2,500 for most items, and it might be $1,500 for certain items like IT equipment or fitness equipment. So these are items, again, that last longer than a year. So that's the sort of summary definition of capital. So Columbia Association has used a category process for allocating capital dollars, and it's been very effective. And I think it helps the community relate to the projects as well. So the category 1 projects are those that are focused on board's strategic goals. And they're specifically identified and approved by the board, and they're generally focused, as you can see, on watershed and environmental sustainability projects. Category 2 projects, these are also specifically identified and approved by the board. They're larger, phased, generally non-recurring, or they're major reinvestments in facilities and projects. And then the category 3 amount there at the bottom, it's $4,207,000 this year for FY24. It's periodic capital maintenance or capital improvements, equipment, and those is approved in this sort of allowance by the board. And then those projects are submitted within the organization to a cross-functional team that reviews them and determines whether or not they should be recommended to the president for approval. So none of those projects can be started without the president CEO approval. We won't even give out a code to start those projects. So we take that, it's a robust review process that we take very seriously. So I want to point out here that we're projecting and proposing a total of $11 million. So $11 million was the amount that the board approved for FY23. In FY21 and 22, each year it was only $8 million, reflecting our pandemic constrained resources that was more severe at that time. So moving from $8 to $11 million is a 38% increase. And we feel that that's adequate for our capital maintenance needs at this time. So, okay, Danica. So this is just some perspective on that. I did mention that the senior team is confident that this is adequate for normal maintenance. I do want to point out it does not enable or allow any new capital items, and it doesn't help us to reduce the replacement cycle for some of our assets, such as pedestrian bridges, for example, or pathways. But this does align with the community input that we received back in the pre-budget prioritization exercise. That the community feedback at that point was very clear that it was more important to those respondents to maintain our existing assets rather than adding new ones. So again, I noted it was higher level than the past couple years. We think it's reasonable. We still have ongoing pandemic constraints on membership, really non-annual charge income. And we're concerned about rising interest rates and the potential of an impending economic recession. So we think that we like the $11 million and think that's something that's appropriate and manageable for CA. So those are the high-level information on the budget. If you are interested, it's posted on the website. You can drill down into your favorite program or service and really see what we project for FY24 at this point. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Lakey, and thank you, Susan. Appreciate that background information. Hopefully everybody learned a little bit of something. I feel like I always take something away, even hearing this all the time. So before we dive into our questions and answers, I just want to go back to something that Lakey pointed out at the beginning of this presentation that I think is important and can get mixed up, I know for myself, in a budget process like this, which is the fact that we are in this pre-budget stage. And what is important about that is we, as a staff, have been instructed by the board to estimate out some things. And this is not a budget draft, and it is not our role or senior leadership's role to really decide what is added or taken away. That is then up to the board what to do with that. And at this time, we've been instructed to stay steady with what we had last year. And so that's what these estimates reflect. So just something to keep in mind as you ask your questions. And if it feels like, I'm maybe rephrasing a question, it might be because that the staff is not the right venue or the right recipient of that question. And perhaps it's a good one for the board as they consider this moving forward. So just want to point that out. And let's get into it because there are quite a few questions here and I appreciate it. I'm going to start with Ashley's one because it's fun, if that's okay. Ashley is asking about, do you know at this time if there are still plans to make improvements at the lakefront as previously discussed? At the time, thinking it was around 1.5 million that was suggested. So Dennis or Lakey, I assume that one of you would be the best to answer this.
So I can answer that question. We have $500,000 that is already approved that we're using for some design improvements at the lakefront right now.
Awesome. There you go. I think this is an easy one to respond to as well. Joanne was wondering about the tennis court improvements included in the capital improvement right now estimates. And Dan, does that include more pickleball courts? Do we know that yet?
So those would actually be Dennis's tennis courts. Those are the free tennis courts out in.
I apologize. You're totally right. I called on the wrong person. Dennis.
So right now that does not include specific pickleball courts, although wherever we restripe or improve courts in the open space, we always stripe them for use both as tennis and pickleball, but it does not include standalone separate pickleball courts.
Awesome. Thank you both. Tina was wondering about grant making. So I'm going to read this directly. How much does CA anticipate budgeting for grant making within the community? And how does that compare to previous years? And what do you anticipate the grant application process to be? So those are kind of three separate questions. First, how much does CA anticipate budgeting for grant makings? What are these estimates showing us at this point? How does that compare to previous years? And what do you anticipate the application process to be? I'm assuming that is a Lakey Susan combo, maybe.
Sorry, so the staff recommendation is no grants in FY24. Again, would be what we would be anticipating just because of the uncertainty of the economic realities and the human behavior, just not knowing what the real impact's going to be on memberships and other paid services activities.
Awesome. Tina got 3 in first, so I'll ask another one. I'm gonna ask this one verbatim to make sure that I have it right. It is another one that's kind of multi-part. The first part being, how much is CA anticipating budgeting for legal fees next year? And second part here, is that anticipatory of the board continuing to retain separate legal counsel from the organization?
So I can give you that. First of all, we did include dollars at this point for that separate legal counsel for the board in the board page. At this point, it's $75,000. The legal fees under the direction of the general counsel are projected to increase as compared to FY23. We have them at, I think I'm hesitating because it's on 2 different places. So there's about $660,000 on the legal page and another $100,000 in the real estate services. We're going to combine that as we move forward. So approximately $760,000. That is more than last year.
Thank you, Susan. I want to point out too, if you want to, just to reiterate, because I know this can get lost, if you are interested in kind of diving into, drilling into the details of this estimate, you can head over to columbiaassociation.org/budget, and you can access the full pre-budget book that is made available to the board. So if that's something of interest, or if there's a particular area, as Susan mentioned earlier, that you're interested in, that is a good place to kind of dive in. And of course, we can answer some questions following your review of that. So let's see here. Let's go to a question from Sharon. So just to make sure it fits the, what we're talking about today, which is this pre-budget priorities. And Dennis, I believe this would fall under you. We're talking about whether or not the USGS gauging stations would be included in these estimates as of right now on the stream above Wild Lake, and gauging stations in Columbia streams, if there is right now funding.
So there is funding in there to continue to fund the stream gauge that we funded for the past several years, but there is not money in the budget for additional gauges on other streams throughout Columbia. Okay.
And then another one from Sharon having to do with open space. And Dennis, I want to make sure, because I know I talk to them a lot out in the field. So I think, it's important to point out, I think this work is already happening, but, is open space employees removing trash, log jams, invasive species in repairing zones, and also installing and maintaining bioretentions, while providing community education and planting native plant species and trees, planting native species and trees. Can you kind of speak to, what we're already doing and perhaps moving forward, what you're looking at?
So I would say yes to all of those questions. And the FY24 budget includes about an additional, between all of those items that were just mentioned, probably an additional $100,000 or maybe $125,000 between trees, bioretention, invasive plant removal, log jams, working in the streams, and those sorts of things. They are ongoing, and we also work with the county specifically on log jams in streams, because some of that is in parts of the open space that, although they look like CA property, are not. But yeah, yes to all those, and yes, additional money is budgeted.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And thanks for the additional questions, everybody. I'm working on the multi-computer right now, trying to monitor everything. So thanks for your patience. So let's go to somebody anonymously, and sorry, Dennis, you're getting a lot today. I was wondering about play surface replacements and whether or not, there's some concerns about synthetic surfaces, burning feet and hands of shoeless kiddos. How do we approach that right now?
So that is not for synthetic play surface. That is for, so we have about 12 inches of a product called FI-bar, which is specifically made for tot lots and playgrounds. And the playground surface replacement is the removal of 12 inches of that material, which gets contaminated with organic matter from trees, and replacement with FI-bar, which is a natural material. So it is not a synthetic poured product.
Got it. Awesome. Dennis, let's just keep it rolling. Kenneth was wondering how much has been budgeted this year, at least in this estimate, for bamboo removal and how that compares to the last year.
So this year we have 75,000 budgeted for bamboo removal, which is up 25,000 or 50% from last year.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, I'm trying to mix it up. Come on, somebody's got to ask a question for Dan tonight. Come on, he's got to be put on the spot a little bit, right? Let's go to, we'll go back to one of Tina's original questions. She's asking, how much is CA budgeting for board activities? And is that higher or lower than this year? And by how much? I assume Susan would be the best person to answer this.
I will do that. I'm going to flip to my handy page here. So all in, just what's being assigned, or captured on the board page. And that includes an administrative allocation, for time that team members spend on board activities is $1,448,000. That is higher than what we anticipated for this current fiscal year, and by about $248,000. In part because of that legal fees noted. And I did want to clarify something there, that the legal fees that are shown on the board page is not just the legal fees that are used in support of board activities or for board matters. So that the dollars that I mentioned on the general counsel's page also support board activities because the board and the organization are aligned. So wanted to clarify that, but yes, it is more. That's
great. Thank you. Let's see here. Sharon was asking, Dennis, sorry to come back to you, but was asking, is this estimate, is there a dredging fund included for ponds and lakes? And perhaps there's a question about it being funded annually. Susan, maybe we can start with how we perhaps do budgets in the fiscal years, because I think that's important to note that we're not projecting out multiple years. If there's something you want to elaborate on with that. And then Dennis, if you could address the question about the dredging and any budgeted amount for that.
Sure. So the dredging is actually a capital expense for Columbia Association. That's part of the capital budget. So there's a separately identified amount this year to start a dredging project at Wild Lake. So those projects get planned they do actually get projected over a multi-year period based on the lake management plan and the sediment removal needs. And so Dennis is really the expert there, but I'll ask him to help me out.
So the long-term lake management plan includes a program for the 3 lakes, and that's what they call a hotspot dredge every 5 years, and that is in the 10-year capital improvement program. And for something like a Jackson Pond or a smaller body of water, that would come out of either the Category 3 or the watershed improvement money. So there is funding on an annual basis for dredging and lake and pond maintenance. That's just part of our capital program.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I want to go off script a little bit here because something that I think we should all be aware of right now, whether it's our own 401ks or how our own businesses are doing, how our own places of employment are how these global trends are really impacting what we do day in and day out. So I'm curious, and maybe I'll start with Dan, if you don't mind, Dan, me putting you on the spot. if there's something happening right now beyond our control and even beyond our community that's you're seeing day to day that's really having an impact from this kind of budgetary conversation that people should be aware of?
Well, I mean, I think the two biggest things, and Lakey alluded to them in her opening, are one, supply chain issues, challenges. We are having trouble getting a circuit board for the swim center right now, and we're not sure where we're going to get one. So we're looking for that, and so there's multiple examples of that. Inflation at a 40-year high, so everything costs more. So every dollar that we have doesn't go as far, just like in your household. So that continues to be a challenge as we look to serve our community. And then probably the biggest and most challenging is just a continual staffing shortage, particularly our frontline teams, our school aid services teams. Teachers are very, very hard to come by right now, not just in Columbia, nationwide. Lifeguards that was mentioned earlier are particularly challenging as well. But all frontline staff positions are challenging to hire right now, and the team continually works against those three big challenges.
Dennis, what are you seeing out there with your team in terms of direct impact?
So staffing continues to be a problem for us, and we're still working through some of that. But also what's interesting is the lead time on commercial HVAC systems is unbelievable. I'm speaking to 30 or 40 weeks, where you'd expect 12 weeks or 15 weeks in the past. What's also remarkable is tot lot or playground parts can be as much as 30 weeks out. So planning ahead. And I purposefully in community ops, I make sure my fuel tanks are topped off, and I got salt ahead of time. All that stuff that I can buy, I buy, because I never know what's going to be out of stock. But I'm sure that when I need it, if I don't have it, it will be.
And Susan, is there anything you wanted to add from kind of a more global level, organizational level that people might not be aware of?
So right now, the interest rate environment is helping CA because we're in an investing mode, because it's after the annual charge has been billed and collected. So we have cash in the bank, and those rates that were not, where the returns were non-existent, they're up a little bit, and that's helpful. But we're going to be renewing our line of credit while we actually have initiated that conversation, and that's variable rate debt. We haven't drawn anything on it this year. It's there if we need it. We do pay an unused commitment fee that's variable. So just what is that going to be like? I don't, it's hard to say at this point. And I also think that we don't yet see the impact, I don't think, on our community's behavior of these impacts of higher cost of goods, and maybe people have to cut back on their spending, or they're not so sure they're going to sign up for tennis lessons this year or whatever. And then potentially as real estate values reset, certainly there was a run up in values, no question about that. How much of a reset will there be that would impact Columbia is completely unknown at this time.
I will add to this one. I leave it. We have a lot of in-house experts, and they are definitely the ones that drive putting these estimates together. But since that's a bigger picture question, I agree with everything that has been said. But one element I think is so important to highlight that in some ways is obvious, but sometimes can be too obvious, and that is completely unpredictable. That is by far the biggest challenge. So if Dennis knew, okay, 30 weeks, I'm going to start ordering them at that pace, we would have a momentary frustration. We don't know if 6 weeks from now, the lead time will turn into 7 months or 2 weeks. And it really has been that variable. So I really want to applaud the teams, including a lot of our administrative services, on the adaptability and the continued pivots that we have to make in real time, you know, in height of season, particularly over summer. And anyone that follows our documentation, you know, that's all posted on the website, as Susan mentioned, our quarterly reports, you know, there are more exceptions and there are more variations, and can we get it locally or do we need to get it globally? And I think that that's something that we don't see an end in sight. It really is a new normal in business, and that affects every single solitary team at CA.
Thank you all for that perspective. I think it's important to remember that none of us are in our own little vacuum and function in that. Lena is putting out some kind words, applauding Lakey and CA's focus this year on increasing participation and awareness in the CA Points program. We love CA Points. This is the first year I think I've ever seen CA promote it at community or school events. I've also spoken to administration at the local middle and high school who said participation is up from last year and really up from pre-COVID. Thank you. First of all, Lakey, would you like to explain quickly what CA Points is for those in the audience?
Yes, I would love to, because this is a favorite of mine. So last year when I started, it was in its 21st year. And I, you know, would speak to people and say, this is one of our key accessibility points. And I was shocked at how many people didn't know about the program. In short, any student that is in a Columbia school has an ability through earning good grades and good school attendance to earn a membership for themselves, and depending how well they do, even their entire family. And that is something that we have existed, as I mentioned, but we have, to this point that was just made, we actually started doing significantly more outreach on it last summer and then really focused on the rollout this school year. So I'm proud to say that every school in Columbia was invited, with the majority participating, which was new this year. We attend more events, and it is going again in a better partnership with the school system, actually going into take-home folders to touch individuals that I think it really was a word of mouth. You know, it was one of those systems that needed to get some improvement. So from a process perspective, I am very proud of that. I'll leave it to Dan on whether the number changed in our budget, but we are seeing higher participation early, absolutely.
So as far as dollars budget, there's not actually specific dollars budgeted. What we do have, though, are multiple points of entry. As Lakey pointed out, we have the CA Points program. We have the income qualified membership, which can apply to any of our membership levels. In addition, specifically for the pools, we have the 2 second Sunday swims every summer, where anybody in the community, any resident, can come and swim. But also last year for our Columbia card holders, if you're a resident of Columbia, you're eligible for the Columbia card. We gave each family 4 passes to be used in the pools between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So we have done a lot and created a lot of access points to create increased accessibility for the community, specifically around the pools, but also in other areas as well, with the income qualified memberships and the points program.
Dan, you brought up pools, and that's a perfect segue into Lena's question here. She was wondering, are there funds included in this pre-budget estimate this year to increase access to outdoor pools even more?
No, as I addressed that, there's not specific funds. These programs is sure. Where the quote unquote funds are directed and providing these accessibility opportunities.
Just wanted to make sure that we had that answered. Awesome. Tina has a question about minimum wage. I know this is something we covered last year in our presentations about the budget and the budget process, but how do you assess the impact on the organization of the county's increase in minimum wage? Has it been detrimental? Are there upsides?
So we assess just from a dollar standpoint, we are able to project fairly accurately what the impact will be on the financial side. So last year, it will for FY, really starting at the end of last year and for this fiscal year, the impact was significant because the minimum wage went up so much. It actually increased twice, once in January this calendar year and again in April. And so, and we, in our analysis, found that it was important. We knew it would be, but you just had to follow through and make sure that we addressed the impact on folks, our employees who were already at minimum wage, the new one, new minimum wage had been here for a while, and just those around it, that kind of wage compression adjustment. So we made a lot of adjustments. A lot of team members got increases, and I think all of that is favorable. I think it lifted morale. I think it just generates pride in the workplace and what CA is and how we take care of our team. But it's a financial challenge. There's no question about it. And so this year it increases again in January from $14 an hour to $15 an hour. So we'll have some adjustments to make, not as significant as last year because we knew the 15 was coming and we planned ahead for that.
If I can tag on to on the positive side, I would definitely agree with what Susan has already said. And I will add that particularly last year where 2 increases happened, and again, we have already projected, included in this year's budget, the additional increase. It was really important to us at a leadership level to talk about the change in minimum wage as a change in a business cost, and that has a real impact, as Susan said. Over the course of just over a 12-month period, it will be a change in cost of approximately 30% in total, just in the tenure that I've been here at CA. And that is among all the other unpredictability and variable costs that we've talked about that no one was anticipating, right? But with that said, it was so important to us, even as that legislation was coming forward, that we integrate it into our business model because one, we are a community service organization. And so we are a hyper-local employer, which a lot of people do not realize. The vast majority of our employees live in Howard County. Many do not live in Columbia that frankly would like to, but housing limitations here in Columbia, because as Susan mentioned, it is a hot real estate market. But because we are hyper-local, it is also very important to us that we are making that contribution to the community. So I think being an employer that the team wants to be a part of, and we did a lot of wage compression changes. We did an analysis and then made some wage compression changes above the minimum wage to ensure that people, as Susan was saying, had been here or had been at different levels, that we didn't suddenly have people, making more, but then people right above them not being correlated. So there were a lot of moves on that last year, and they're much more built in this year because that legislation happened mid-fiscal year for us. But I'm very proud of how we were able to adapt and how we were able to make that an asset for our employees as much as it is a true business cost.
Great. If anybody has any more questions, we probably have a few more minutes because we have some closing comments we want to get in before that 7:30 time, and certainly want to respect everybody's time tonight. Tina was wondering, will $11 million in the capital budget allow CA to get ahead of the environmental challenges and sustainability issues that we're facing and clear back deficits in maintenance? What could the organization do with an additional $1 million? I don't know how, how fair that question is, but maybe that first question is a good one to tackle there. How are we getting ahead of environmental challenges, sustainability issues, clear back deficits, and maintenance? Dennis, I'm assuming that's best suited for you.
So I would quickly say that CA is a leader in sustainability. We are 100% renewable, either through wind credits or through solar that we own. For every bit of electricity that we use at CA. So we're ahead of that. We're moving away from natural gas and we're moving towards heat pumps, which again is going to be renewable. We have money invested in, in watershed management. I have dedicated people looking at invasive species. So what I would do with another $1 million is more of what we're already doing. I think we've caught up with back maintenance. Could we make aesthetic improvements? Yes. But in terms of are the roofs watertight? Are the HVAC systems working? And the answer is yes, where I can get units. And there's some on back order right now. But the buildings are structurally in good shape. And I think honestly, and I've been here, as some people know, a long time. They look better now than they ever have. So I'm proud of the work that, especially in sustainability, that Jeremy and his team have done for CA.
Thank you, Dennis. With no more questions in the queue here, I want to ask one more as we start to wrap up, and that's about this realignment that we saw over the last year or so. It's, certainly different. I think internally for all of us, it was something to adjust to, but does anybody want to share how it's affected their department, or Lakey and Susan, the organization overall, what we've seen the impact over the last year?
Well, I'll open, certainly if anybody has specific impacts on your team. It is something that I'm asked for people that are more knowledgeable, and then meaning just kind of in the inner workings of CA. And then people that read the documents, saw a difference. But as Danica said, even across the organization, there have been definitely adjustments to be made. What I would say in terms of the big moves that, externally people would understand the most is that what is now community operations is what was, largely open space and facilities as a group. And so there was some loose alignment there. What is now community programs and services, what was formerly sport and fitness, and then community services, and we put those together. There was some internal service realignment, particularly around how communications and marketing worked. But I'd say those are kind of the biggest moves. So as I said in the beginning when I was walking through it, I think there was a lot of, at least what I saw as when I was out in the community talking to people didn't understand, okay, so is it this or is it that? So I think there was some alignment there that just helped in base understanding. In terms of the impact that we've seen, and it was mid-fiscal year, it was in October of 2021. So we've been at a year, in total, 12 months of being in this structure. And the things that I probably would point to that I think have been the most impactful is, first, there was what I call invisible work going on. So work that was being picked up by a team, that was being covered a little bit by this team, a little bit by that team, and we put them together. And that matters a lot for us in terms of really understanding resource allocation, really understanding how much employee time is going towards something, how much organizational time is going towards something. So I think that happened quite a bit around, I mentioned event logistics earlier, but there's also a lot of work that was happening in real estate that was split apart. And by it being split apart, we weren't looking at our whole portfolio, if you were to use that word. And we are a significant property owner. We have a lot of easements on our property. So thinking about it and managing it that way, I think matters a lot. I would also say that the collaboration that has occurred within community programs and services is 100% what I was hoping for. So there's a lot more cross-pollination. I mean, one easy example is our art center and archives and multicultural programming all did exhibits that rotated through our clubs. That might seem minor, but the amount of feedback we got of people that were, I had no idea we had an art center. I didn't know we did that programming. So the idea of really making sure that we're collaborating, but also one of our biggest strengths as an organization is the diversity and scale of our services. So I think that has been, in my opinion, very observational. And then the last thing would be the workflows. So the ability for teams to have more collaboration built into their structure has facilitated collaborative workflows. And at CA, given, again, the complexity and scale, almost every workflow we have goes from one team to another, to another, to another, and maybe back to that first team. So having that connection more baked in has had significant improvements in our efficiency and effectiveness, I would say.
Anybody want to add to that before we move on? All right.
Yeah, I can just reiterate what Lakey said. I think the biggest change has been the cross-pollination between, what was community services and sport and fitness. As they came together, it really enabled us. And there's really no reason that it didn't happen before, other than the natural kind of workflows and silos that happen in organizations. But once people came together, we were like really truly able to build on the true definition of wellness. And it wasn't just the physical, there's the mental and the educational piece, and we're able to tie it together. And the whole team really bought into that vision. And there's been many examples, and the exhibits were one. We did the multicultural team did dance classes with the group fitness team. There's been different painting and art exhibits. The teen center and the fitness clubs are working together to provide programming in areas that aren't for people who can't easily reach the teen center. So it really does truly allow us to bring the whole wellness to the community, and not just in individual pieces, and help tie it all together. And frankly, the team loves doing it. It's just watching them get excited about the opportunities and seeing their face light up when they figure out they can do something and bring this new program to the community. Trunk or Treat's a big example of, if you were there and you saw all the different teams that were there supporting that, and it's just, everybody's just having a lot of fun with it.
So I'd add that the other improvement in my mind is that team members really feel empowered with collaboration. And when I look at the work that marketing communications did with community ops at the lakefront events, it was absolutely remarkable. And Sam and his team were empowered to do so much more down there. I'd also say that Jeremy going out and meeting with individual facility managers outside community ops to help them better manage their facilities, or Nick helping out at the golf course when he's needed, are all examples of doing more with the team members we have and getting much more out of it together than we would have gotten individually.
Awesome. With that, I think we have a few next steps to go over. So Lakey, I'll turn it back.
I will keep this quick. So if you'll go to the next slide, this is really just trying to illustrate in the simplest terms how this process works without dates affiliated. So BOD is Board of Directors. So these are really kind of where the key decisions are being made along the process and how it works. So as Susan mentioned, in September, we're board meetings that included the board identifying strategic priorities. We are now in the stage where we're giving a lot more details and visibility into these estimates. So again, a big distinction we started last year was fixed and changeable. And this year, because of all the circumstances that we talked about, the board strategic direction was much more so, keep doing what you're doing without any massive changes. Identified some priorities around sustainability and climate vulnerability, and then some leadership development. And then we're really at a stage, you know, certainly this special information system, our online survey, where the community continues to give us feedback around if anything is particularly more important than another. And we try to really help you think through, you know, if we can't do it all, what is the most important? And again, so many of the constraining factors right now are well beyond our control. So then the CA board really comes in and has that role in establishing what the expected outcomes are. And that's really when we get into getting much more specific about, okay, if this isn't in the estimate, add it, or don't include this in this estimate. And that's really when we kind of pivot. It goes back to staff, and we're then going to be producing a full draft budget. So if you go to the next slide, you'll kind of see how that lines up with the calendar. So again, we're at November 1st tonight. At the next meeting next week, there'll be more board discussion. And then at December 8th, which is our board meeting in December, that is really not a full final vote. That really is going to be for the draft budget. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. That is really the guidance that we need to be distinct from the board. So that part is a vote, but it's not the final budget approval. I just want to make that very clear. So in December, what we need as staff from the board is going to be, this is exactly what we want you to go produce. Because again, the document is this thick for a reason. That takes a lot of time and energy of those teams to put that together. So there'll be a vote that's kind of that guidance, but it's not the final budget approval. So then there'll be another opportunity for online feedback from the community around the draft budget. And then we will have 2 more board meetings, a meeting and a work session. And then it's in February that the final board vote is scheduled to happen to approve the vote. So expect to see a draft budget in December. You'll have a lot of time in those winter months to be looking in December and January at that draft budget, provide feedback to the board, provide feedback through an online survey. And then the expectation is that it will be approved in February. So you can see Danica mentioned, you know, we have a web page dedicated within our website to the budget. We post materials there. At any time you can participate in board meetings. There's information on how to do that. And then please definitely participate in the online surveys. And then Danica, do you have any closing comments?
Nope, I just popped up a poll on a poll to see if everybody has actually taken the time to do that survey. If you have, thank you. If you haven't, consider taking it. It's a great way to get your voice heard. And if you have, pass it along to a neighbor or 5 or 10. This is the great way to voice your opinion. Give us your feedback as we move our way toward the more finalized budget. So again, I just want to echo quickly what I said at the beginning because we're 4 minutes over already, but just by showing up tonight, you are engaging, you are doing the work, and we so appreciate your valuable time spent with us to learn a little bit more about the process and to, again, offer your feedback and ask your questions. So again, this has been recorded. We will post this as soon as possible on our YouTube page. For those who couldn't make it, again, please share it with your friends, family, and neighbors. Lakey, go ahead.
I have one correction from my astute team, and I knew that I was, okay. Here's how it works between December, January, and February. In December, we are going to get a vote from the board that says, this is what we want you to take from these estimates and put into a draft budget. In January is when we will post the draft budget for the online survey and for input. In February is when the final vote on the budget happens. I hope that is now crystal clear.
See, there's a reason we have questions, a Q&A. It's that right there. Sometimes we even had to set ourselves straight, but that's what we're here for. So if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out, communications@columbiaassociation.org. I'd be happy to pass along any questions to the appropriate people. Again, I can't say it enough. Thank you for being here tonight, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.